welcome everyone welcome to this most auspicious occasion. My name is Suzy Ross, and it is my great pleasure to be a part of this very special evening where we get a chance to celebrate our dear Robin Lysne's remarkable achievement. I'm a longtime friend of Robin, as it appears most of you are too, and maybe even sister family members are here. And I just love her dearly. And along with being a fan of Robin, I'm also an assistant professor of recreation therapy at San Jose State University. And I happen to be an author of a book as well, that's about my research on transformation called The Map to Wholeness. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce to you Miss Elizabeth McKenzie, who will be introducing Robin formally to you. And Miss Elizabeth McKenzie wrote a novel, The Portable Veblen, and it was longlisted for the National Book Award for Fiction and received a California Book Award for Fiction as well. Her book has appeared in the New Yorker, The Atlantic, Tin House, Best American Non-Required Reading, and more. McKenzie is currently the managing editor of Catamaran and the senior editor of the Chicago Quarterly Review. So Elizabeth, I will turn over the mic to you to introduce to us all our beloved Dr. Robin Lysne.
Oh, thank you, Suzy. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm also very excited to be here to celebrate this wonderful novel and to celebrate Robin's achievement. So I'm going to introduce Robin now, even though I know most of you know her. Robin is an author, artist, and energy medicine practitioner. She is the author of 7 books on topics of health, healing, poetry, and metaphysics. Tonight she's launching an ancestral women's series with 2 works of historical fiction to bring to life the courage and wisdom of her Norwegian ancestors. The Legend of Randine, Entering the Sisterhood, is the first book in the series and is being launched tonight. The second book, The Legend of Randine, The Laerdal Letters, will tell the story of Randine as a midwife in the backwater of the Sogne Fjord in the Laerdal Valley of southern Norway. And this will come out, I think, early next year. Randine is the story of Robin's great-great-great-grandmother, who was an actual midwife in the 1820s and 30s. Robin's earlier writing centers on energy medicine and metaphysical healing, tapping into heart-centeredness and inner knowing. A natural entrepreneur, she has also founded a cooperative publishing house, Blue Bone Books, which publishes poetry and works by a variety of Northern California authors. Born and raised in Rockford, Illinois, she worked as a museum curator and artist for many years in Michigan. In the late 80s, she made her way to California for advanced studies in cultural change, energy medicine, and creative writing. She earned her first master's degree in spirituality and psychology at Holy Names University, an MFA in creative writing at Mills College, and a Ph.D. in energy medicine at the University of Natural Medicine. Her poetry has been published in North American Review, Catamaran, Samizdat, Porter Gulch Review, Sand Canyon Review, and many other publications. Based in Santa Cruz, California, she has a private practice in energy medicine and intuitive mediumistic readings, and she gives lectures, classes, and workshops as an author, meditation teacher, intuitive medium, mentor, and intuitive coach. Please welcome Robin Lysne.
Thank you, Lisa. So nice to be here. And thank you, everybody, for coming. It's really great to see my expanded community. It's really great. Thank you. So I'm going to start with the first chapter, since the epilogue is already online and you can get that downloaded for free. And this is chapter 1, Treasure. Bergen, Norway, Wednesday, 29th November, 1820. Winds howled off the Bergen harbor as snow swept across the ice-laden dock and swirled around the Black Horse Tavern and a row of houses on the waterfront. Down the alley, 3 blocks from the tavern, owned by Peter and Lena Eriksson, was their other enterprise, Eriksson's Bed and Board. Inside the boarding house, the Erikssons and young Randine and the other residents lay sleeping in their rooms while the wind rattled the windows. A deep chill had set in that night as the temperature dropped with the incoming storm. The fires in the hearth had burned down to embers just before dawn as Randine lay dreaming. Thursday, 30th November, 1820. Randine's diary. That night before my baby came, I had a dream that Father came to my bedside and smiled at me. Then Mother joined him. It was lovely to see us all together again, as though I had never been apart from either of them. As though there had never been a horrible fight between us. I felt so happy. They said nothing about James or how I was supposed to be. They said nothing about James or how I was supposed to be their perfect daughter, nor did they ask me why I didn't just break their hearts completely by running away to marry him. Instead, they smiled calmly and with love. The bright colored lights of many spirits rose up behind them and gathered around my bed. Then James, my love, joined everyone. He looked sad and yet was happy to see me at the same time. The light streamed from him like rays of sun through stormy clouds. He brought with him the power of the Norse gods. Hela and Holda, the twins from the underworld, rested their cold hands on his shoulders. Then Mother Frigg and Father Thor came too. Frigg, goddess of the hearth, had her spindle and her yarns, and Thor, with a stern but loving look on his bearded face, lifted his great arm and pounded his hammer on a golden anvil. Out shot a bolt of lightning that struck my belly. I screamed, waking myself up from the dream at once. I knew in that moment that James was dead. Randine clutched her belly, seized by a spasm of pain unlike anything she had ever felt. She was terrified. She wasn't sure what to do, what to expect. Would she die? Would her baby survive? She wanted her mother. Mama! She would know what to do. She remembered this dream as though she were still in it, felt the stab of their absence, tried to hold on to an image of her parents loving her. But when she looked again, only Hela and Holda were smiling. Then the dream left her, and she found herself alone in the cold room in the Erikssons' boarding house. A spasm of pain broke through Randine's silent reflection, and she screamed. Mrs. Eriksson shouted from the corridor, "Randine, are you all right?" Dawn was breaking. The light through the window in Randine's room, just enough to see Mrs. Eriksson's shape at the door. She hurried over to Randine and drew back the heavy curtain shielding her bed from the winter chill. Randine felt a bolt of pain, a kick, then a popping inside her and a flush of warmth between her legs as water gushed out of her. "Get the midwife, please. It's time. My waters." Mrs. Eriksson ran out of the room to rouse her husband. "Peter," Lena shouted down the hall, "go and get the midwife. Randine's having her baby." Peter gulped down the last of his coffee, grabbed his coat, and hurried out the door. Then Lena flew back down the hall as far as her large, heavy legs would carry her and climbed up the stairs to Randine's room, lantern in hand. Randine could not move or sit up. The lamp played games on the ceiling, swirling light and shadows around the room, and sudden sickness washed over her. She closed her eyes. So that's the first page and a half. And Elizabeth, I didn't know if I remembered that we were going to talk first. and you're muted, so if you can unmute. See. There.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, thank you so much again for inviting me to celebrate the release of this novel with you and have this conversation with you. The novel really impressed me in a number of ways. The story is exciting and it's full of life. The writing is superb. The narrative voice feels just right for the time. The setting is vivid and persuasive. I truly felt like I was in 1920s Norway. And the stakes all through this book are very high for Randine, and the decisions she makes, that she's forced to make, are life changing. So all of this is just accomplished in a very tightly told story, and I think you've done a beautiful job with this. So,
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I wanted to ask. There's so many things I'd like to know about this, but you introduced the novel with something from your own diary about a trip you made to Norway to meet your aunts, see the locations where your ancestors had lived, and you end up getting a chance to meet some cousins and other relatives, and they bestow you with a trove of materials about Randine.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering what happened then. Like, did you take them to have them translated, or did you translate them, or what happened with those?
Well, what they actually gave me, so that's where the fiction begins.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Yeah.
What they actually gave me were documents from our family history that were from what's called the Big Book. And the Big Book in Norway is a collection of amazing documents that was done by a man whose name I don't know, but he created this literal big book of all the farms, all the papers, all the death records, records, all the immigration papers, and he matched them all to the farm locations. And so they gave me the copies of the Lysne farm pages, which
Mm.
documents and documented that Randine was actually a midwife and that she went to school in Oslo, which then was called Christiana. So that's what they gave me, as well as information about relatives I didn't know here in the States. A man named Bob Lysne, who I guess lives in Minnesota and had been there visiting them. And then we caught up on their family and how their family came to be living on the farm still. So that was pretty exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, I really liked how you handled that in the introduction, where you talked about how um, when they said Henrik was an illegitimate child and it made you uncomfortable, and you kept wondering why they kept saying that, but it ended up the way you transformed that into the story was just beautiful. So,
Oh, thanks.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, if someone in those days was assigned as someone's wet nurse, then it implied that not only did the mother have a baby already, but the child had a mother who died or a
Right.
mother who was not there. So that's where I started because that's all I had. That's all the information I had. And
Oh,
birth dates and death dates, and that was it. So that's where I began her story, um,
oh,
imagining what was it like for a 15-year-old to be unmarried in 1820. You know, that was the first thing that really made me ponder her life. Yeah.
okay. Because, yeah, I mean, the things that happen to her are, I mean, it's almost like a saga, or, it's operatic, in its intensity. I mean, they're just, but completely believable the way you've presented it, and the emotions you've rendered that she goes through. I mean, it's just beautiful.
Thank you.
Um, so, and yet it's also so grounded. I mean, it's like it's this huge story, but it's very grounded in very real details. So, and another thing was that well, I was wondering, there's a lot, I mean, it's obvious that you've absorbed a lot of like understanding of Norwegian culture and about the history of Norway, and all the stuff about the Norse gods, and how that conflicted with the introduction of Christianity, and Randine's resentment towards the church because how badly they treated her when she had an illegitimate child. And um, but I didn't feel the weight of research. I didn't feel like, oh, this is research being crammed down my throat. It was just a story and it was all there. But tell us about your research.
Oh, the research was a lot of fun. It happened over many years. It's taken me 20 years to get it to this place. And that's because I was working and doing many other things. But also because the research, I would write letters to Norway. I wrote letters to the midwifery school in Norway to find out about, her and whether she actually attended, and they wrote back a very lovely letter and said she had very high marks. And so all the things in the second book about her going to school are actual facts. Not only the second book talks about her finally getting to Christiana and going to school there. And the facts of that, with the professors, the different nurse midwives that she had that taught her, and the doctor, all of those are factual. So I found out that this doctor, this young doctor, had decided he came from Denmark, and he decided that he was going to create a midwifery school. And the background of this is that in 1805, Denmark gave Norway to the Swedes. Now, anyone that's got Swedish Norwegian background knows that that is not an okay thing for the Norwegians. Because the Norwegians and the Swedes are like brothers that don't get along very well, and they're always fighting. And so Denmark, to protect Norway, gave it to the Swedes and said, here, it's on you now, you can protect them. But what that created was battles along the border and a lot of unrest in Norway. And the reason for that was that in the 1700s, there was the Black Death, and it almost wiped out more than half of Norway. And so it was slowly getting repopulated. And by the time Randine came to life and was born and lived, her life as midwife was right at the beginning of the baby boom that occurred, that then prompted Norwegian immigration in the 1850s. So part of what's happened is that she lived at a time when there was a huge baby boom. We think we're the only baby boomers, but that's not the case. And actually, our ancestors who came over here, not just from Norway, but from Sweden, from Denmark, from Ireland, from Scotland, all of them came because they were second sons,
Right.
or they were people that were not able to inherit land, or they were starving.
Mm-hmm.
And so our family, the second son, was not only Ola, who was the father of Heinrich, but Heinrich. Heinrich was a firstborn son, but he was born of a second son. And so because he was a firstborn son, and because he was considered, illegitimate, he didn't count in the inheritance. And Ola then was the father, and he ended up coming to the United States after Heinrich did. Heinrich was our first relative that came to us in this country.
And where did he go?
He went to northern Wisconsin. Eventually, they started. He and his wife Kirsty went to Chicago first, and then that's going to be novel 4, 3, and 4 because her story is remarkable. She was quite an amazing woman, and she and Heinrich landed in Chicago, and then ended up taking a year later. They went up by wagon train up to northern Wisconsin, outside Stevens Point, in a little town called Tompkins Center. And that's just one side of the 4 grandparents. But yeah.
Wow. How did you find out about I mean, the fact that, you know, the Norse gods and the trolls and all of that folklore was still sort of tucked away in hidden corners of people's lives.
Well, there's a couple of things that were created. Part of it is the trolls still are a very big part of Norwegian culture, and I found that out during the Olympics that happened a couple years before I went to when I went to Norway. I went to Lillehammer, and that's where the Olympics had been, the Winter Olympics. And I talked to a couple of friends of my sister Nan and Ralph's who lived there and stayed with them. And I was very excited about that. And I had seen this amazing presentation they had done for the Winter Olympics, where they had a whole dance of trolls and little people, and the people came in costumes, and there were big trolls and little trolls, and they were all over the place. And then there are rocks that have rune marks on them. And I didn't see any when I was there. But one of the things that really impressed me about Lærdal, the village that she ends up moving to in the second book, is that they had on the wall of stone above the harbor a bar of chords of music. And it had nothing, no sign on it. It didn't say this is the symbol of whatever. It just had the music, just a chord that if you knew the music, knew how to play music, you could sing the chord. And I asked someone about it, and they said, "Oh, well, that was written by a Norwegian man who saw the music come out of that rock in Lærdal." And it became an anthem for the Norwegian people during World War II when the Germans had invaded Norway.
Wow.
So I was like, what? He saw it come out of the rock. And I said, that's fascinating. And they said, oh, yes, well, you know, the land has music in it. And the land has, you know, of course we have trolls and we have all the little people. And, you know, they just talked about it like it was no big deal. And I was delighted because, you know, I thought, wow. And this bar of music inspired the Norwegian people to keep their faith all through the 5 years that they were resisting the Germans during World War II.
Wow. Wow.
So that's how I began to like understand it. And then I have friends, and I do myself, have experiences of the actual little creatures that are considered trolls, fairies. If you're intuitive, you can actually perceive these things, and they do exist. So I just want you to know that they do exist. So,
Wow.
yeah.
I'm very intrigued. And what are herderers again? You mentioned those in the book.
Yeah. That's a fun myth that I discovered, that herderers were the she cows that would come in the mythology of childbirth. Herderers were the ones they were she cows that would come at night, and they would steal the babies and they would replace them with their own babies. And it was a way for people to justify their lack of nutrition, because children, if they're not if they're not fed properly and don't have good nutrition, then very often they you know, don't develop. Their brains don't develop. They may die. And because of the numbers of babies that died and mothers that died at that time, it was a way to justify what was happening. So the way the myth happened, that I discovered, was that herderers were especially dangerous to children and mothers in the very first few weeks. And so if the father slept guarding the mother and the child, then the herderers couldn't get them. So that was a very popular myth, and it, you know, faded out eventually, but it was very much a part of their culture, part of the culture.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, can you imagine a she-cow coming in the middle of the night stealing a baby? But that was what they believed in.
Well, so there's going to be another volume that
Yeah.
is going to come out next year. And how did you realize the story would be told in 2 volumes? I mean, what led to that decision?
Well, that's a great question. I wrote this as one novel, and I was given the feedback from a number of other people that were. I sent it to 110 different um, agents,
Oh,
and the feedback I got from the one agent that I did actually get was that it was too long and that it needed to be divided in two. And I kind of like blew that off. And then I decided to write a screenplay. And so I took a screenplay writing class at Cabrillo College here. And the first thing that the professor said was, "It's too long. You can't do this whole thing as a screenplay. You can only do part of it." So then I thought, okay, well, I'll divide it in two. And so I'll just do the first half, which is until they leave for Layerdal. Um, and so that was what I did. And as it turned out, they were the right size. Each section of it was the right size for the current reading that people are doing today. Most people don't want to read a 450 page novel. They only want to read 150 pages or 200 pages at the most.
mm,
And so that feedback was also given to me by people who are publishers and people that are marketing books and things like that. So that's how it came to be divided into.
well, I can't wait to read the next one. And you leave us, I mean, the book is complete. I feel like this book is complete as a story, but it also leaves us wanting more. So,
Oh, good.
yeah.
Good.
But I wonder, should we see if people attending would like to ask you any questions?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, how should we do that?
Yeah, if they go down to the reactions section on the bottom, they can put their hand up and then we'll see that hand up. And then Susie, if you would monitor it, then that would take it off of me.
Sure.
So anyone have a question or anything they want to ask? There's a hand. Dana? Yeah.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here. Congratulations, Robin, so exciting. I'm wondering if you could share how long it took you to write this book.
Yeah, well, the research, it was started back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So it's taken 20 years to get to this point. And so yeah, it's 20 years. 20 years, a lot of research and writing and then rewriting. And I had a professional editor who I worked with for a while. Then I set it aside and then I go back to it. And actually, part of the reason I wanted Elizabeth McKenzie to be here tonight is because I was just about done with this. I was like, I can't do any more to this. And I took it to a class at Catamaran Writing Conference, and Elizabeth was my teacher. And she encouraged me to keep going, even though some of the people in the class were not that excited about what I had presented. She was like, "This is good. You've got it. You've got the dialogue down, and yeah, go for it. You just need to keep going." And so that was why I asked her to be here tonight, and how excited I was. And I did. I kept going. I got an editor, and I finished it. So I
Yeah, I didn't realize that, and that makes me very happy.
Thank you. Well, another one of my teachers is here tonight, Ruth Saxon. And hi, Ruth. It's so nice to have you with us. And she actually was a teacher at Mills College too, and did a whole lot of help with writing and so on. So I want to appreciate her too.
Okay, I think Janet has her hand up.
Yeah, Janet. Hey, Janet, you have to unmute. You're muted, Janet.
Okay, I'm unmuted now, I think.
Yes.
Well, I don't really have a question, but I just started reading it a couple days ago, and I just wanted to make a comment that the way I know it's good is that it stays with me. When I put the book down, and it's like still with me. I'm like, "Whoa, there's this story I gotta get back to, because I'm interested, and it's very interesting, and it's very well written. And
Thank you.
especially enjoyed your descriptions of the fjords and all the things that you.
Oops, you're cutting out.
Whoops.
You froze, Janet. Oh, of the
Oh,
fjord.
too bad.
Yeah, hopefully she can come back. Janet, you froze. That's okay.
Well, I agree with everything she said.
Hi, Ruth.
I didn't realize, I forgot that I was muted. I just wanted to say congratulations. And when you sent me something to read earlier, of course, because of my Norwegian heritage, I felt an immediate interest. But looking more closely, I'm looking forward to reading the book. So
Great.
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you. Appreciate it. So nice. So nice to hear you. Anna, I see a hand up there somewhere. Dana, you can put your hand down maybe. Okay.
I have a comment.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to interrupt.
Go ahead, Dana.
Okay, so there's a little bookstore down the street, Two Birds Books, and I was wondering if they could carry your book.
I don't know, but Bookshop Santa Cruz has copies, so you can go down.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. And would it be possible to ask, I can ask that bookshop if they would carry your book? Because
Absolutely.
it's really cute and they've only been there since December.
Oh, bring the postcard in.
Okay, will
Absolutely.
do. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, it's harder today to get books into bookstores, believe it or not. Because there's so many books. There's almost 100,000 books a year that come out today. That's twice as many as when I first started publishing in the mid 90s. So it's a lot harder to get them in the stores. So. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, Suzy, go for it.
So what in the journey of creating this baby, what's your favorite part of your journey, and what is your favorite moment in the book?
Good question.
Well, part of the reason that I wrote this book was because right after this book, I discovered Randine. I got married. We had a child who died. And I was devastated by that. It blew open my psychic ability, which is why I'm an intuitive. I mean, I was intuitive before, but it really magnified it like crazy after that. And it took me over a year to kind of get my feet on the ground again. And then I started looking at this book and I thought, wait a minute, she was 15 when she had losses that were bigger than this. And I couldn't imagine how could she live through this. So as I started doing my research, I realized that this was in part my story. And it was also my unlived life, because I was old. By the time I was pregnant, I was 45, and I really couldn't do another child. And we had 2 kids that were having challenges and stuff that in my new marriage. So I decided that we weren't going to have any more kids. So it was really clear to me that kids weren't going to be a thing for me. And so I decided that I needed to do more research on this. And so researching her story and understanding how a teenager went through the loss of her partner, and then also in the first chapter, she has to give away her child. And that is like, how could she do that? Like, how would that feel, you know? And that kind of loss, and then to have this gain back with this baby that she wet nursed. So I wanted to explore the emotions of what she went through and how did she get through it. And the only thing I could think of that the way she got through it was through mentorship and other people being around her. She couldn't have done it herself. I couldn't have done it myself, and I was 45. So I was very happy to have other people, you know, be there. So that was part of why I wrote this book. It was the inspiration. She was my unlived life. Yeah.
That was super beautiful.
Mm.
And what's your favorite moment in the book?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. Um, I think when she went from not being able to function well to then having this baby, in chapter 8, I'll just read a little bit of this. Chapter 8, The Apprentice, Friday, 30th of March, 1821. Dear Diary, I'm so excited to begin washing dirty sheets for Ursula. I have work. Perhaps I can earn my way after all. Ursula welcomed Randine as her assistant. Her duties included washing and cleaning the birth stool and the pig bladder used for enema, as well as sheets, towels, and nightgowns used for birthing. Randine had not worked this hard, even for Lena, as she loved supporting Ursula, who took care of so many. I like this part of it because she's getting a purpose. She's getting her life. Her life means something more than you know, the losses or the birthing or the breastfeeding that she was doing for Heinrich. So that to me is giving her inspiration. So I was really happy about that. So that's one part. I mean, there are a lot of favorite parts. The initiation ceremonies are specifically wonderful for me to read. The last one, I won't read it tonight because it's kind of the crescendo of the book, but where she goes through an initiation ceremony toward the end of the book, of this book, and becomes a part of the sisterhood. She's officially a part of the sisterhood. Well, that came from my actual experience of being in initiations, not only with Native American tribes here in the United States, but also in Brazil in a group called Umbanda. And in Umbanda, they had an initiation ceremony that was similar to this, not exactly the same, but somewhat similar. And so I took little elements of that out and put it in this one.
Yeah, those initiation ceremonies are amazing. Um, was there a sort of sisterhood, or is that a fictionalized idea?
You know, it's interesting. There is an actual sisterhood, not necessarily in Norway, but on a spiritual level. And I have run into this a couple of different times in a variety of circumstances. There's also a brotherhood. So the brotherhood is of healthy men who um, are holding an energy, the spirits of healthy men that are holding an energy for men to get over the wars and fighting and you know, murder and killing and all that stuff. Not to say that women also don't do that from time to time, but for the most part, the healthy male honors women. And in the sisterhood, the healthy feminine honors men and also honors women's existence and service and presence. And these are actual spiritual, um, like angelic beings that hold this space. And I have run into it in a number of ways. I couldn't go through them all with you, but I am aware of them. And so I wanted to write about the feminine coming back into this time because we are in a new age. And part of that new age is honoring the feminine. So that's what this book is really doing. It's going historic, but it's actually bringing in that women need to be honored. And actually, consciousness is higher when women are honored. So the society as a whole is growing toward more consciousness when women are honored. When women are not honored, that's lower consciousness. So that's what this book is really describing and really about, is the shift in consciousness that we need to make and that we're making right now. We are making it. Which is exciting. We're in a new age. Yay. Yeah.
Ah, that's wonderful.
Robin,
Yes.
Mary Ellen, hey,
Hi.
when you were writing this and researching, did Randine come to you in dreams or in your meditations and things?
That's a really great question. She did come in one dream that I had. And then I had a friend who I used to work with. Her name was Nelda Warren, and we would exchange sessions. And one day we were talking about this book and talking about writing it. And she said, you know, have you asked Randine for permission to write this book? And I said, you know, I haven't, but maybe I should, because I was having all kinds of trouble with it. And I said, I think it, you know, it's her story. I should be asking her if it's okay. And so she did a kind of a guided imagery with me, and we made a circle together and did a ritual to call her spirit in. And we did a whole lot of information and found out, you know, that her life, she did want this to be written about. She was happy to have it written about. And her life was much harder than actually the book portrays. So that information also came through. And I was like, whoa, okay, I got to write this book now. So that's what inspired it. Any other questions? I wanted to read a little section from the grief ritual, and I was looking for that. Are there any other questions?
Robin,
Yes.
I'll jump in with a question.
Okay.
You know, you guide a lot, most everyone here knows, you know, that you guide a lot of people's lives. And you can do that because of all the wisdom that you have and the capacities that you have. And I'm just wondering if there's a way that you're also teaching, you know, like I wonder if you can speak to, like, when you were weaving this story, were you at all also trying to teach us some things? And if so, what comes to mind?
Well, that's a good question. I was trying to integrate a process that I use a lot with clients called Heart Path. And Heart Path is a process where you can actually integrate broken parts of yourself. And so the circles that they do in this in my book, that Randine and Lena and Ursula do together, actually actually are taken from the first book that I wrote.
Uh-oh.
Am I muted? Oh, there we go. um, the first book was Ceremonies from the Heart. It was called Dancing Up the Moon initially, and it was a book full of rituals. So that was one thing that I took from that. And then I did integrate Heart Path into this. When they were sitting in the circles and calling in the gods and goddesses to speak to them and give them information on what they should do, it's very similar to doing that with a circle of people. And you can do that today. I mean, we can do that today. So yes, there's a lot of teaching in this book about how to help yourself through ritual and also help your community and other people, and also how to heal from things that are difficult. Yeah. So I'd like to read from the letting go ritual, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah.
Randine's diary, Thursday, 29th November, 1821. It has been 1 year since James died. Today is the day before Heinrich was born, and a few days past the birth of little James. It feels as though I walk 2 feet under the ground through mud. My feelings are so mixed up. I cried all morning. I am glad Ola is not due back for a while. Ursula took Randine down to the breakwater near the end of the harbor. They walked a long way along the shore with Heinrich on Randine's back. Ursula had asked her to bring something that reminded Randine of James. Something special he might have given her that she was holding on to. Randine always wore the broken token he had given her, so she brought that along with the spoon he had carved for her. This was their betrothal spoon. He was to make a bowl, too, had he lived. She could not think of why Ursula would want her to bring these things from James. When they arrived at the farthest end of the harbor past the jetty, the wind was cold, but it was clear for a change and bright. Bergen was overcast so much of the time. These few hours of sunlight were welcome and warming them nicely. Heinrich was sleeping when they got to the rocks. They took him out of the carrier on Randine's back. While she laid him down beside the basket of food they had brought, she sheltered him from the cold with a shawl. Then, with another small blanket, Randine made a little tent with a second shawl to keep him out of the wind. Ursula took Randine's hands, called in the 4 directions, announcing to the world, "Today we are here to mourn and release Randine's lover, James McGregor." The wind stopped while Ursula spoke, and the water seemed to calm. She took a golden straw wreath from her satchel. Randine wondered when she had any time at all to make this. The wreath had black ribbons spiraling around it with tiny figures on each side, a man on one side and a baby in a cradle on the other. Then she began to sing a lament that people sang when there was a loss. It was an ancient song that had no words really, more of a deep moaning sound that started high and went low into her heart. Randine tried to join her, but she could not sing. Randine could not let go of James more than she had. She was at the bottom of her grief, drowning. When she finished and asked Randine to tie the spoon and the necklace from James to the wreath, it broke her open again. But James was gone, and he wasn't coming back, and neither her baby. The necklace was for James, the spoon for her child. Ursula sang another song of release and motioned to Randine to go to the ocean. Randine slowly and carefully crawled out over the rocks that made the breakwater. She stood above the water on a rock that stretched out over the sea. When Ursula hit a high note and Randine was ready, she tossed the wreath out as far as possible. The wind picked up that very moment and carried it out further than Randine could ever have thrown it. She sank down on the rocks and wept like she'd never wept before. She felt the wind come up again and watched it push the wreath out in the swift, choppy water beyond retrieving. Randine said goodbye to her dear James, and it was over. Then, deep from the soles of her feet, she felt a wail come up, a scream. It was as though the earth itself was screaming. The scream ripped through her as if she was in labor. Then she realized that there had been no funeral for James except for one memorial for all the men who were lost in the ship. Because of Heinrich, she could not attend and couldn't have brought herself to go anyway. She could not go to any service in the Lutheran church, as she swore she would not step one foot in there again. James and his crew were mourned in Scotland, where he and the crew in the ship in which they sailed were from. When Randine finally brought herself to crawl off the rocks, Ursula waved her hand in each direction to open the circle of the 4 directions. Randine could hear Heinrich fussing and went to him. So then there's another section there about him and Heinrich and so on. But so that ritual of release was actually similar to one I've done myself. And so that is part of where it came from. And understanding the loss of a child and the loss of a partner, you know, all of that came out in that particular chapter. So. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions or anything else I see it. Oh, Ken, I see a thumb up there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, it's wonderful to have everyone here, and I'm so grateful to be reading this to you. I wonder if there's one last thing I could read here that would maybe when she meets Ola, and then Ola is the man who is the father of Heinrich, who was my great-grandfather. And so Ola comes after she starts wet nursing this child, and she's living at Ursula's now. So I'll just read a couple of paragraphs here. "Come in, Ola," Ursula said warmly. As he entered the tiny house, bending his head under the doorframe, Ola could smell the scent of lavender and birthing stew. Then he heard the little cries of his son and knew that something in him had changed forever. His sad eyes filled with so much love at the sight of his son, and his joy was mixed with grief for the loss of Ragnald, the child's mother. Ola knew that they would always be together in spirit, he and Ragnald, and he must accept things as they are. At 25, he was the picture of a Norwegian sailor, extremely tall, almost 6'5", and extremely handsome with high cheekbones, fair skin, and sky blue eyes. His shock of dark brown hair was raked to one side. Even in the dim candlelight, Ursula could already see a few white hairs on the sides. His dark blue uniform was neat, his shoes polished, and of course he wore his government-issued double-breasted wool coat to keep him warm in the freezing weather outside. Come in," Ursula said, quickly so the child and mother will not catch a chill. When she escorted the strapping, though humble, young man to the fire, he gasped when he saw Randine with his son. Here was a beautiful young woman, her long hair, the color of red autumn leaves, falling around her shoulders, with his son nestled in her arms. Ola could not help that his knees buckled as he folded himself into a chair beside her and the baby. Randine was radiant. Her fiery beauty and love for his tiny boy felt to him like the morning mist at sunrise. So, too, he felt this woman's sadness. So that's when she first sees her, and he falls in love with her, but she's not falling in love with him. So I won't say anymore. You guys can read the story. Any other questions?
See.
Hi, Anna.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm wondering about what kind of constraints you felt in writing this because of the historical context being so different from our time period. And then maybe for the same reason, was there some strong thread that connects to women's stories of modern times that you felt you got clearer about as you wrote the story?
Well, things haven't really changed that much. I mean, the burden of pregnancy lays on women's shoulders, period. And even though you could have a really supportive husband or partner, which does happen, and there are very supportive men, thank goodness, um, when a woman gets pregnant out of wedlock, especially not so much today, but actually when I was growing up, it was like the worst thing that could ever happen to you. Okay, the worst. And I think you other women on this call probably have experienced that or know what I'm talking about. So really, things hadn't changed very much. And especially in 1820, when the Lutheran Church had come in, and it was very strict at that time. It was much worse than it is today. I mean, today it's much more liberal, much more accepting of people. But in those days, there were certain preachers that were extremely harsh, and they actually put women in stocks who were too promiscuous or considered promiscuous or got pregnant out of wedlock. And so they punished the women. And that is just, like, where's the guys? And certain tricks that were brought up in this book, like women getting a broken token and man has the other half. Well, this is like something that sailors did all the time. They gave broken tokens probably to 5 or 6 women at different ports. And it was considered to be kind of like, oh no, not another broken token. And so they bring this up. I bring this up in the story because it was a real thing that actually happened. Broken tokens were part of how men seduced women. So the reality of that hasn't changed that much. It's still hard to have a baby that's not born in community. It's still hard to have children when you're a single mom. It's really difficult. In fact, it really takes a community to raise kids, and we've forgotten that. So part of what I wanted to show in this is that community is what got her through. Her community, and that we need community too. We need it just as much today as we did then. So the restraints of it, actually, I found more similarities than I found dissimilarities. So I think that's something that history teaches us, things that we forget, but it's really not that different.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, unless there are any other questions, I think maybe we'll wrap it up.
Yeah. Great.
Anything else from anybody? I just want to thank you, Robin, for presenting this book to us and for writing it. It's a beautiful novel, and I hope everybody will get a copy and tell people about it, because it's got it all. It's exciting, it's lovely, and you've done a wonderful job with it. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you, Suzy. I appreciate both of you a lot, and appreciate all the work you're doing and the books that you've written. So thank you. Yeah. Thank you all for coming. I so appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Hey, Ken. Nice to see you.
What a great accomplishment, Robin. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank
I
you.
was doing domestic duties, but I listened to every word.
Oh, great, great. Well, thank you very much, Ken, for being here. Ken,
Loved it.
yeah, great to have you. Yeah. And thank you, everybody, all my friends and family and other people. Appreciate it.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Dana. And Doreen, thank you. You can unmute yourselves as you're going out if you want. Great.
Can't wait
Thank you.
to read
Looking
it.
forward to reading your book.
Yeah, I have copies
Me
here if
too.
anybody wants to buy them, as well as a
Yes.
bookshop. Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
All
yeah,
right. Thank you.
Good night.
absolutely. Good night. Thanks so much for being
Night.
Thank you, Robin. Congratulations.
here. Okay,
Congratulations.
thank you. Thank you so much. Great to see you all. Thanks, Susie. Thanks, Joy. Thanks, Joya.
Thank you, Robin, for having us.
Okay,
It was
thank
a
you.
beautiful evening. I thought it was awesome.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you could be here, and thanks for sharing.
And
sharing.
I'm so glad you recorded it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll be sending this, putting this up on my website so people can listen to it. So great.
Perfect. Okay, good evening.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you. Bye.